Okay, today I'm going to be playing a bit of jazz on a jazz master. I know that's a bit weird, but it might just work. And anyway, I'm probably going to give this video one of those annoying YouTube-ish titles, something like "Every guitar player must learn some Charlie Parker. You must do this thing." And I'm actually being quite serious when I say that I think every guitar player would benefit from learning a bit of Charlie Parker. And Charlie Parker was, of course, a legendary sax player, composer, improviser, one of the great geniuses of 20th century music. And there's just so much you will get out of learning one of his tunes, whether you're particularly interested in jazz or not. So why do I think you should do this? Well, there are a number of reasons. And firstly, and most straightforwardly, I think they're just great pieces of music to play and they're great fun to play. But beyond that, I think a lot of Charlie Parker tunes are unbeatable technical exercises. And often you're going to be dealing with quite fast tempos, unusual melodies for guitar players. We're trying to translate sax lines onto the guitar, and that presents us with all kinds of interesting challenges. And it's a good way to get comfortable moving smoothly all over the fretboard, and it's a good way of getting out of guitaristic cliches and to start thinking about the guitar and the fretboard in some different kind of ways. Also, learning some of these tunes is going to be a great rhythmic workout. A lot of these pieces are very rhythmically challenging, and obviously we're dealing with jazz here, so there's going to be swing in there, but also a lot of syncopation and rhythmic displacement, all kinds of rhythmic tricksiness. So really good for you in terms of working on your rhythm. I think it's a great way of opening up your ear to new sounds, and Charlie Parker was one of the inventors of the bebop language, and he was really pushing boundaries in terms of his melody and harmony. It's a great way to start hearing those kind of sounds. And lastly, I think if you are interested in seriously getting into jazz guitar, then these tunes are just an essential part of the history and the language of jazz. So I hope all of that has convinced at least some of you to give this a go. Let's get started. Now, I'm sensing some of you might be a little worried by the fact that Charlie Parker has this reputation for rather terrifying virtuosity. And yeah, it's true that a lot of his tunes are pretty challenging to play, particularly on the guitar, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm assuming today that most of my audience are not already jazz guitar players, so I'm going to keep things today towards the easier end of the spectrum. I'm going to be focusing on two tunes in particular, one of which is very easy and another one is, I suppose, more kind of an intermediate level tune. I want to start with the tune Now's the Time. This is a jazz blues in F, originally recorded in 1945, and I think this one is a really good way into Charlie Parker. It's nice and simple, but it's definitely a classic tune. It's in my top 10 must-know jazz tunes, I think, for beginners, and it's definitely one that's played all the time by jazz types. So let's begin with this one. I'm just going to play it through for you, and then I'll break it down. So as you can hear, really simple, really catchy melody, but still a lot you can get out of this one in terms of just phrasing and how you approach this kind of thing on the guitar. So as I said, this is a jazz blues in F, and the first decision you've got to make when you're trying to play this stuff on the guitar is exactly how you're going to do it. And I think the best thing to do is to do a little bit of research. You definitely want to try and listen to various recordings, and my little playthrough there was based on the original 1945 recording, but there are various other Charlie Parker recordings where he might play it a little bit differently, and of course this one has been covered and played by all kinds of different people through the years. So it's really important that you do some listening, do some research, and then decide exactly how you're going to approach it. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong when it comes to this kind of thing. Different people will play these tunes in different ways. The melody will be slightly different, or there'll be slightly different embellishments. The chords might be slightly different underneath it. But it's important to say, do some listening, and then you can make some educated decisions about how you're going to do it. And this one is all based on a simple repeated motif. It's just three notes here, so C, F, F, G, C, and F. And the first thing you're going to need to do is just decide where you're going to play that on the guitar. Where does it feel best? There are loads of options here. loads of possibilities, but I decided to play it here around the 10th fret. That just seemed to flow nicely. I've got the C here, the F, and I'm hammering into this G note here. So it is very simple, but there are some details which it's important to get right. Firstly, we've got the rhythm here, so quite syncopated here. We're coming in on the and of 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So we've just got that C as kind of a pickup note. Then we're hitting this F note, which is the root notes, 2 and 3 and 4. I've also got this hammer-on in here, and one of the things that I like doing with jazz is to use hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, those kind of articulations as a way of enhancing the swing feel. So what seems to work best for me is to pick the notes on those swung upbeats and then hammer into the stronger beats. So with this phrase, we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So I'm picking this note here on the and of 1. Hammer on is going down on beat 2. Just more swing going on there than if I were to go. That could work. It just sounds a little bit more stiff to me than this. And another thing that I often do with jazz is just to have my pick moving with the rhythm, again just to enhance the swing and the groove of it. So my pick is moving 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so whether I'm playing a downstroke or an upstroke is determined by the rhythm of the tune. So here it's starting on an upbeat, so I'm picking that with an upstroke of the pick, 2 and 3 and 4. So this phrase I'm picking up, down, down, hammer, up, down. No rules with this kind of thing, but that's what works best for me and seems to sound best to my ears. And this little phrase is really the bulk of the tune. We play the opening phrase, bit of space, we play it again, some space, then we play it 3 times in succession. Then we've got this, so just dropping down to this B flat note. So I'm coming down to the 8th fret to play that note. I'm just playing that phrase twice. Then back to our main idea 3 times. And then towards the end of the 12-bar form, in the turnaround section if you like, there's just a variation. So we've got a new note here. We've got an A flat note here, which is it's the flat third. So you can think about the notes in this tune as perhaps coming from the F major pentatonic scale, and then with the addition of this flat third, you've got what some people refer to as the F blues scale, the F major blues scale rather. So F major blues scale as opposed to the F blues scale. This is the major pentatonic with the addition of that minor third. So playing that phrase there, and again just dropping down for the final phrase. And these kind of decisions about where you play this stuff, it's really determined by what flows best, what feels best on the fretboard, and some of this is just a personal thing, but you want to avoid any kind of awkwardness or tension when you're playing this stuff. So the next tune I want to look at is a little bit more challenging. This one's called Billie's Bounce, and this was again recorded in 1945, I believe in the same session as Now's the Time. There's a little bit more going on here. It's a little bit more technically challenging, but let me just play this through for you. Again with this one, it's played in lots of different ways, and you've got a choice here how you're going to do it. I mean, you look at a real book or something, which I think is how I originally learned this tune. But then if you listen to the original recording, there are some things that are slightly different from what the real book says. So I think it's best to do some research, do some listening, and then do it your own way. But this is the way that I like to do it. once again, this is a blues in F, and it's very interesting listening to the original recording. And the melody, the head on that original recording is played by Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And sometimes they're playing the same thing, sometimes they're in harmony, sometimes they're in different octaves. So you've got to make some decisions about how you play this. And interestingly, you can actually find Charlie Parker's original score to this tune, the lead sheet. And that's quite interesting. It's very different from what you see written in the real book, and it's also slightly different from what you hear on the recording. So this is the way that I've decided to do it. And the opening phrase goes like this. So it's a blues in F. A lot of this is in this kind of C form, C position, which is where it sort of sits best for me on the guitar. And you've got this little F triad shape here, and that opening phrase kind of based around that F triad, kind of sliding down and then back into this C note here. This is the fifth. You've got lots of these chromatic passing notes in jazz and in bebop in particular. Now I'm playing this note here, this E flat. That's what I'm hearing on the recording. A lot of people would play this phrase with a D there. It doesn't particularly matter ultimately, but this is the way that I've decided to do it. And then you've got this repeated two-note idea, just an F and a D. And the rhythm here is once again really interesting. It's all syncopated, and it's great how this repeated phrase is coming in a different part of the beat each time. So rhythmically speaking, we've got 2 and 3 and 4. So the first time we play that, it's coming in on the and of 4, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So it's coming in on the and of 4, then the and of 3, then the and of 2. So quite tricky stuff. If you're not used to this kind of syncopation, you might well just need to play it slowly, count it out, and just get a feel for where these subdivisions of the beat fall. And this is definitely something you can learn from working on this kind of jazz stuff, is just getting a feel for whereabouts is the and of 3 or the and of 4 in the beat. And obviously when you're playing a tune, when you're performing something, you don't want to be counting something out, but that's just a process you have to go through, a stage you have to go through until the point where you can internalize these kind of tricky rhythms and just feel them naturally. So I definitely recommend slowing down, counting this out, maybe working with a metronome. Next little phrase goes like this. So going up here on the B string, got this little kind of embellishment or trill here. And like with Now's the Time, a lot of the note choice in this is based around this F major pentatonic, the F major blues scale kind of sound. So in this position you can see it as living around this F7 chord or this F major chord. We've got this scale. F major blues scale, which is the F major pentatonic with this added minor third or flat third. Next phrase is this. So we're hitting the root here of the 4 chord, just chromatically approaching that B flat. Then we've got this bit. And you could play it here. And this is where you've got a choice which octave you play this stuff in. And what I did when I played it through is the first time through I played it lower, the second time through I played it higher. But the notes are these. So E flat, a C and an F. Then we've got this absolutely essential part of jazz or bebop language. So you hear this all the time in jazz. And it's actually a really difficult phrase to play on the guitar and to make it flow smoothly. I don't know whether it's a lot easier on the saxophone. I've never played the saxophone, so I'm not sure. But certainly this phrase doesn't fall particularly naturally on the guitar. But this is the way that I've decided to do it. You've got to have some kind of a string skip in here, I think. So I've got an E, and I'm skipping over to this G. Then we've got this kind of chromatic thing. It's what jazz players might call an enclosure. This phrase is played over the kind of the turnaround. So it's a 3-6-2-5, and we're enclosing this F sharp note, which is the third of a D7. So we're going above, below chromatically, and then we're hitting that target note. So, and then we're skipping again up to this E flat, and then some more chromatic stuff on the G. So that's how I'm playing it. And it kind of feels good to me to have a little slide in there and to flatten down my first finger to play that high E flat. So great and essential bit of jazz language that. Then we've got this. So we've got some arpeggio stuff happening here. It's a descending G minor with a major 7th arpeggio. So I'm playing this on the B string and then just going down one string at a time. Quite awkward to play on the guitar, but this seems to be a sensible fingering to me. But then inevitably you've got a bit of a skip there coming down to this F. And then we're back into position and we finish off with some more of this phrase here. So that's how I've decided to do it. And then, as I said, when I played it through, I did go up an octave with that part the second time through. So you can play exactly the same ideas up here. So playing that in much the same way as I played down here with the string skip. That's that minor major 7 arpeggio. Playing it slightly differently up here, kind of stretching between the D and the B flat. Because I'm higher up the fretboard, that's a bit easier. And then coming back down here for the final phrase. So I might just play all of that for you slowly. So there we go. This kind of thing is pretty challenging if you've never done any jazz like this before, but it's definitely doable if you take it slowly and just break it down phrase by phrase. And you might well like to do it slightly differently from the way that I've done it. As I say, it is quite a personal thing with jazz. You might like to adjust some of the fingerings that I'm using here, or maybe change some of the notes even, and come up with your own version of this. That's it for this video. Do let me know if you'd like to see more of this kind of thing, a bit more jazz. And with my audience, I'm never quite sure how many jazz bows are lurking out there, how many jazz guitar players. Maybe there's quite a few of you, maybe there's just a smattering, but let me know if you would like to see more jazz. I can certainly do that. If you wouldn't like to see more jazz, let me know too, and I'll make sure that this kind of thing never happens again. But in all seriousness, I do quite enjoy doing these jazz things from time to time, so I'm sure there'll be a few more of these in the future. If you would like tab for both Now's the Time and Billie's Bounce, that's going to be up on my Patreon page. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.